Hi guys, this is going to be the first video for Chapter 1, the human body. So our learning objectives for Chapter 1, we're going to define anatomy and physiology and some of their subdivisions. We will talk about the structural organization of the human body, and we will list and talk about the 11 organ systems of the body. We'll describe functional characteristics for maintaining human life, also survival needs of the body. We'll define homeostasis. We will look at positive and negative feedback and how these maintain body homeostasis. We'll look at the relationship between homeostatic imbalance and disease. And we'll describe anatomical position, use anatomical terms to describe body directions, regions, body planes, and other sections. We'll also locate the major body cavities and their subdivisions, as well as their associated membranes, and we'll list the major organs contained within them. And lastly, we'll talk about the 4 quadrants or 9 regions of the abdominopelvic cavity and list the organs that they contain. So first and foremost, we need to know the difference between anatomy and physiology. Anatomy is more so following form, while physiology is more so function. So anatomy, this is going to be the study of the body parts and their relationship to one another, while physiology is looking more so at the cellular level. So the study of the function of body parts or how they work to carry out life-sustaining activities. We'll see that there are going to be subdivisions for both anatomy and physiology. Starting with anatomy, we can have gross, or what's also referred to as macroscopic anatomy. So this is going to be viewing structures that are visible to the naked eye. Some examples of this could be regional anatomy, looking at the structures that we find in a particular area of the body. Or we could have systemic anatomy, looking at all the structure you would find in a particular system. Think the nervous system, the muscular system. These would be a few examples. Microscopic anatomy, micro meaning that these are going to be things or structures that are too small to be seen by the naked eye, so you would have to use a microscope in order to view them. So an example here would be cytology. Cyte, that prefix there meaning cell, ology, study of. So cytology is the microscopic study of cells, or histology, hist meaning tissues. This would be the microscopic study of tissues. And this is just a few different examples of microscopic anatomy. And then also developmental anatomy. This would be the anatomical and physiological development seen throughout life. So embryology would be a good example of this, the study of developments that are what happened prior to birth. And just to keep in mind too, to study anatomy, one must know anatomical terminology and be able to observe, manipulate, palpate, and auscultate. So again, these are, when knowing anatomy, we are looking at the structures themselves, but knowing that anatomical terminology. Great examples of those, like I just demonstrated to you guys a moment ago with those root words or those prefixes there. It's very helpful in the study of anatomy. Looking at subdivisions of physiology, these are going to be based on organ systems, so like the renal system, which you can also refer to as the urinary system, so think the kidneys, the urinary bladder, the ureters, cardiovascular physiology, so think the heart, all of the blood vessels, and the blood itself. We're looking at those organ systems and the functions that are happening within them. Often physiology is going to focus on cellular and molecular levels of the body, so it's looking at how the body's abilities are dependent on chemical reactions in individual cells. So again, getting down to that cellular level. To study physiology, one must understand basic physical principles, so electrical currents, pressure, movement, as well as basic chemical principles. But while anatomy and physiology are two separate studies, they are inseparable. Things to keep in mind: function always reflects structure, or you can also say that function follows form. Essentially, there's a rhyme and reason to the design of the human body and the functions that follow that. What a structure can do depends on its specific form. This is actually known as the principle of complementary structure and function. So an example of this, like the incisors, which are going to be some of the teeth that we would find in humans. The incisors are particularly sharp, kind of like scissors. That makes them ideal for cutting. While the molars, which are going to be found farther back in the oral cavity, these have more of a flat surface on the top that makes them ideal for grinding, like a mortar and pestle. Moving on to structural organization, the human body is very organized, and we'll go from the smallest levels, that being the chemical level, all the way up to the organism level. So the definitions are listed here, but I'm going to skip ahead to our next slide so we can go through and talk about each of these individual levels. So let's start with our chemical level. This is where we're going to have our individual atoms joining together to form molecules, maybe even these molecules joining together to form macromolecules and organelles. When we have many organelles coming together, then we would reach the cellular level. So this is going to be where we have individual cells. Now, when we have multiple cells that are similar in nature joining together, then we would reach our tissue level. So for example, here, this is showing us smooth muscle tissue, one of our different types of tissue we find in the body. When we have multiple types of tissues joining together, then we would reach the organ level. Again, many different tissues, or you can actually just say two or more tissues joining together would actually give us an organ. So here we can see that smooth muscle tissue. We can also see some epithelial tissue, some connective tissue. Again, a mixture of different tissues coming together to make this structure, that being an organ. When we have multiple organs that are working closely together for a particular function or functions, then we reach the organ system level. And when we take all of the organ systems and joining them together, then that's when we would reach the organismal level. So again, these are going to be the levels of organization that you do need to know for this course. Moving on to the requirements for life, there are different functions that are necessary for life. Maintaining boundaries, the ability to move, responding to stimuli, the ability to perform digestion, metabolism, breaking down and utilizing energy, excretion, reproduction, and growth. So let's go through and talk about each of these in a little more detail. Maintaining boundaries. This is going to be the separation between the internal and external environments. And how is this maintained? Well, if we're talking at the cellular level, then it's the plasma membrane or the cell membrane that separates the internal part or the intracellular portion of the cell from everything that's surrounding it. So that extracellular tissue that's surrounding it. Another example would be the skin. The skin is the barrier that separates inside of an organism from the external environment. So again, this is another great example of maintaining boundaries. Movement, whether that's the muscular system allowing for the movement of different parts of the body, your fingers, your arms, your hands, your feet. Or if it's allowing for movement inside of the body, say for movement of your digestive organs to help propel digestive materials move through your body, or the movement of the blood through the cardiovascular system. These are also great examples. Contractility, this is referring to movement at the cellular level. So this would all be happening internally. Responsiveness, the ability to respond to sense and respond to a particular stimuli, whether that's maybe withdrawing your body limb from a particularly harmful or painful experience. Say, like if you were to step on a pin tack, or if you were to touch a hot stove or feel something of some kind of painful stimulus, your body would respond to that by withdrawing from that, and that is responsiveness. Other examples, controlling breathing rate and change in response to different activities. Say if you go for a run or if you go to the gym and do a particularly difficult workout, then you might notice that your breathing rate is going to increase. Again, that's responding to another stimulus. Digestion, breaking down ingested foodstuffs for the absorption of simple molecules into the blood. Essentially, taking in undigested materials and using that, breaking it down into smaller parts so that it can be used in metabolism, which is the next part of our necessary life functions, all the chemical reactions that occur in the body's cells. So this is, of course, going to be an energy-consuming process. In fact, we're looking at the sum of all the catabolic events. Catabolic events are going to be where we have breakdown of molecules, and anabolic events, the synthesis of molecules. So catabolic events are known for releasing energy, while anabolic events are known for consuming energy. And metabolism is going to be the sum total of all those catabolic and anabolic events. Excretion, the removal of waste from metabolism and digestion. So the breaking down of proteins, giving us urea that would probably be excreted in your urine, carbon dioxide being produced from cellular respiration, so from all those metabolic events, feces, the releasing of feces or unabsorbed food parts being released from the body. All of these would be different ways of excretion. Reproduction, that's going to be at the cellular level, meaning that the cells themselves are reproducing. This could be for different reasons. It could be for growth, it could be for repair, or this could be reproduction at the organismal level where reproduction results in the production of new offspring. And then growth, the increasing in size of body part or an organism. So just kind of like how the same way you're not the same size you were when you were born from your mother's womb. You're not the same size now. You're much larger now. That is growth of the entire body, different body parts, of course, but of the entire organism as well. Humans are multicellular. We alluded to this earlier. Again, we are multicellular organisms. We have billions and billions of cells. These cells function so that individual cells can be kept alive. So organ systems are going to be designed to service these many different types of cells, and these cells are going to depend on organ systems to also meet their survival needs. Now, there are 11 different organ systems that all work together to maintain life. So while yes, we can think of these organ systems as working independently of each other, they do actually, they all have their own functions, yes, but they work together to maintain or keep the organism alive. An example of the interrelationships amongst the different body systems here. This particular example is showing us how the digestive system, the cardiovascular system, the respiratory, urinary, and integumentary system all work together. So let's start from our digestive system, taking in nutrients, breaking them down, absorbing them, eliminating unabsorbed matter. All of the nutrients that would be within that would be absorbed, that would be digested and absorbed, all that's going to make its way into the cardiovascular system. So the blood vessels, the heart, the nutrients are going to essentially be distributed throughout the body by this cardiovascular system. It's kind of like a large interstate that's going to help the nutrients find its way throughout the body. With that, we're going to have some waste that's going to be built up. So the respiratory system is going to help to eliminate carbon dioxide, but we also need oxygen. The respiratory system is also going to help take in oxygen so those nutrients can be so that they can be metabolized, so we can actually use that to make energy. We're also going to have a lot of metabolic reactions going on, and with that, a lot of waste being built up. Well, the urinary system, and along with the respiratory system, again, they can help eliminate a lot of this waste. The respiratory system's eliminating carbon dioxide, while the urinary system's eliminating nitrogenous waste and excess ions. And then we have the integumentary system, too, that is serving to protect the entire body from the external environment. So providing that boundary, that protection for all of these deeper body systems, so they all work together to keep the organism alive. So the 11 different body systems, starting with the integumentary system, this is going to essentially be your skin, your hair, and nails. Are also going to be some other accessory structures of the integumentary system. Of course, this forms the external body covering. It's protecting the deeper tissues from injury. Another major function, vitamin D synthesis, which vitamin D is so very important to the human body. Also, housing of cutaneous receptors, pain, pressure, sweat glands, oil glands, all these are going to be functions or parts of the integumentary system. The skeletal system, here we're talking about all of the bones that we find within the body, as well as the joints, helping to protect and supporting the body organs, providing a framework, that scaffolding essentially that all the muscles and other connective tissues will bind to. Blood cells, what's called hematopoiesis, the production of red blood cells, they also are formed within the bones. And then we also have mineral storage in the bones as well. The skeletal muscles, or the muscular system consisting of the skeletal muscles, smooth muscles, cardiovascular muscles. All of these are different types of muscle tissues that we'll see, but they allow for manipulation of the environment, locomotion, which is just movement, facial expression, maintaining posture, heat production. All of these are going to be different functions of the muscular system. The nervous system consisting of the brain, the spinal cord, and all the various nerves that we find throughout the body. The nervous system is the fast-acting control system of the body, responding to both internal and external changes by activating appropriate muscles and glands, essentially responding to or detecting all these different stimuli and then appropriately responding to them. The endocrine system, this is going to consist of a series of glands that will secrete hormones that regulate many different body processes, growth, reproduction, metabolism, just to name a few. The cardiovascular system, all the blood vessels, the blood that we find within them, the heart, helping to carry oxygen, carbon dioxide, other waste, nutrients, and of course the heart pumping all of this throughout those blood vessels, and the blood acting as that reservoir, carrying all of these things. The lymphatic system, also the immunity system, or the immune system. The lymphatic system is structural, the immune system is more physiological. So we kind of group the two together. But the lymphatic system picking up fluid that's leached from the blood vessels as it returns it to the blood, disposes of debris and waste into the lymphatic system, where it will encounter things like white blood cells that are involved in immunity, essentially helping to prep the body to attack any foreign substances or anything that could potentially be hazardous or harmful to the body. Then we have the respiratory system, keeping the blood constantly supplied with oxygen while also removing carbon dioxide, performing gas exchange through what are called the alveoli within the lungs. And the digestive system, breaking down food into absorbable units that enter the blood for distribution to the body cells, as well as eliminating undigestible materials as feces. The urinary system eliminating nitrogenous waste from the body, regulating water, electrolyte, and acid-base balance of blood. And the reproductive system, of which you will have both the male and female reproductive systems. They won't be covered in this course. You'll learn about these in AP2, but essentially with the reproductive system, we're looking at the overall production of offspring, looking at the different sex hormones that will affect these structures, aiding in either the delivery of sperm to the female reproductive tract or helping in what's called oogenesis, egg production, as well as folliculogenesis, follicle development, and menses, along with menses and the rest of the female reproductive cycle, and the development of the mammary glands in the female breast for milk production to the supplement a newborn or nourish a newborn. Let's move on to survival needs. So humans need several factors for survival that must be in the appropriate amounts. If we have too much, if we have too little, then it can be harmful. So we have different nutrients, of course, that are needed for survival: oxygen, water, maintaining normal body temperature, appropriate atmospheric pressure. So starting with nutrients are going to be the chemicals for energy and cell building. And so there are going to be what are called the macromolecules, 3 of the 4 of which will be vital nutrients for the body. Carbohydrates, a major source of energy, also a source of structure, but for metabolic purposes, main source of energy. But proteins needed for cell building, cell chemistry. Fats are a great long-term energy storage, but all the food that you consume will be a mixture of these things. You also have nucleic acid, but nucleic acid is not actually used for nutrients, just something that you would actually still find in your food too. It's that 4th macromolecule class. Minerals and vitamins, these are not macromolecules, but they are important in nutrients as well. They're involved in chemical reactions as well as for structural purposes, and they can often serve as cofactors or coenzymes for a lot of enzymatic reactions or metabolic reactions that are happening in the body. Oxygen, a major one, essential for the release of energy from foods. Oxygen is needed for cellular respiration, the production of ATP. We can't produce it without oxygen. So, in fact, we can't live without oxygen. The body would fall into a coma within a matter of minutes without oxygen present. And then would possibly, if oxygen is still being deprived, then life would cease. Water, that's going to be the most abundant chemical in the body, provides the watery environment needed for all the different chemical reactions happening in the body. It also acts as a fluid base for secretions and excretions. So we are probably well aware of this already, but over 70% of the body is made up of water, such a very, very important molecule for the body. Maintenance of normal body temperature. So the body temperature goes below 37 degrees Celsius, and the rates of chemical reactions are going to be affected, or if it goes above this rate as well. So say if you're running a fever, this could affect the enzymatic reactions, or the rate of enzymatic reactions happening in the body. But it also goes the other way around. Say if you're in a hypothermic state, meaning that the body temperature has gone below that 37 degrees Celsius. And then also the appropriate atmospheric pressure. Essentially, we have to have the correct pressure in order for the lungs to be able to exchange oxygen and to exchange air appropriately. If we have not enough pressure, or if we have too much pressure, essentially this will alter the mechanics, the respiratory mechanics, making it very difficult for oxygen to be consumed, or it could cause more gases, other gases, to actually be kept in the body, so it could become problematic. So we have to have the appropriate atmospheric pressure for respiration or breathing. Homeostasis, this is the maintenance of relatively stable internal conditions despite continuous change in the environment. So homeostasis is a dynamic state of equilibrium, meaning that homeostasis is the maintenance of particular values for given variables, but it will fluctuate a little bit. So it's the body constantly trying to maintain this equilibrium. We may see a little deviation away from that particular value, but again, it's a dynamic. So it's always constantly moving, trying to readjust to get back to that appropriate value. And homeostasis, there's many, many different examples of this throughout the body, but it's maintained by contributions of all the organ systems. Remember we said that the organ systems, they don't work they are independent of each other, yes, but they work together. Those interrelationships of those body systems are working together to maintain body homeostasis. All right, so let's talk about homeostatic control. So, of course, the body is constantly going to be monitoring and regulating all of the different body systems and their variables to maintain homeostasis. So, the nervous system and the endocrine system are going to be the major systems that will be monitoring all these changes, but other systems will also play a major role in this. Now, these variables I've been mentioning, these are factors that can change. So, some examples: blood sugar levels. Body temperature was one that we talked about recently. Blood volume. These are just some of the many examples, but you could go on to think different levels of different body hormones would be one example. So again, lots of different factors here. Now, the homeostatic control of variables involves three components. You'll have a receptor, the control center, and then the effector. Now, the receptor is going to act as the sensor. It is what is detecting the change. It's responding to stimuli, things that are changing, and so it's monitoring the environment. The control center is going to determine a set point at which the variable is maintained and will receive input from that receptor, that sensor, and will determine the appropriate response. So that control center is then going to talk to the effector, which is receiving input, again, from the control center. The effector is going to relay some sort of a response. So it's going to provide the means to response, and then this results either in the reduction of that original stimulus, this would be known as negative feedback, or it will enhance that original stimulus to further push that stimulus along, and this would be positive feedback. Now, between the two, we're going to see an overwhelming negative feedback compared to positive feedback. Now, negative feedback, again, most used, it's going to be the overwhelming majority of the different types of feedback that we see. The response reduces or shuts off the original stimulus, so the variable changes in the opposite direction of the initial change. Essentially, it would be like if there's light on in a room and you were to detect that, and then you turn the light switch back off, so there's no more light. Examples in the body, regulation of body temperature. Whenever your body says say for example, you have a fever, your body of course is going to work to bring that temperature level back down to that 37 degrees Celsius. That increased temperature is a deviation from the norm for the body. So the goal of the effector is to bring the temperature back down to those normal levels. Or regulation of blood glucose by insulin, one of the different types of hormones that we see that helps to maintain appropriate blood glucose levels. Examples of negative feedback: receptors sensing increased blood glucose levels, the pancreas secreting insulin being the hormone that lowers blood glucose levels. So the insulin causes the body cells to absorb more glucose, in doing so lowering the blood glucose levels. So in this image here, we're just seeing the interaction among elements in the homeostatic control systems maintaining stable internal conditions. Essentially, it's just showing what would happen due to an imbalance. So the first thing we have here is a stimulus. It produces that we have some kind of change in a variable that is going to be the stimulus. Then the receptor, that sensor, will detect the change, sending this information to the control center. Now remember, the control center is going to be that second part of this. That control center is going to talk to the effector. The effector is going to reduce the effect of the stimulus, bring it back down to normal homeostatic levels. And this would be an example of negative feedback. Again, the initial stimulus is essentially being halted or stopped by the effector. So we're just going to move past this since it's the same visual here. But remember, we can also have positive feedback to where the initial stimulus is going to be strengthened. So let's look at an example of both, starting with an increase in body temperature. So we have an increase in body temperature, then we'd have temperature-sensitive cells in the skin and the brain. These are going to be the receptors. They're going to tell the thermoregulatory center in the brain, that being the control center, which then is going to cause the sweat glands essentially to become active, causing for sweat to be produced. The evaporation of the sweat essentially will cause body temperature to be lowered through convection. We could also have the opposite end of this. We could have the body temperature becoming more hypothermic, body temperature falling below that 37 degrees Celsius. Again, we have temperature-sensitive cells in the skin and the brain, and forming that thermoregulatory center in the brain. But in this time, instead of causing the sweat glands to become more active, it actually will cause shivering, these little micro contractions of the muscles, which results essentially in heat being released. That heat helping to increase the body temperature. Now, both of these are examples of negative feedback because the stimulus here is that deviation or that change from the normal body temperature value. So both of these are negative feedback. Different things are happening, but both result in the body temperature going back to that normal value. Positive feedback, this is when the response enhances or exaggerates the original stimulus. This can exhibit a cascade or amplifying effect as feedback causes variables to continue in the same direction of the initial change. This usually controls infrequent events that do not require continuous adjustment. In some examples of this, enhancement of labor contractions by oxytocin. This is not something that's happening every day in an individual's life. These contractions, due to the pressing of the fetus's head on the cervix, this causes oxytocin to be released from the pituitary gland. But in this case, that this is positive feedback, so it's going to amplify that original stimulus. So more oxytocin will actually be released, causing stronger stronger labor contractions, and then this will continue until whatever event it is, the desired event has completed. In this case, it would be parturition or birth of the infant. Another example would be blood clotting and platelet plug formation, which is just basically another way to say a scab essentially has formed. This would also be another example of a positive feedback event. So here, just showing an example of platelet plug formation, we'd have a break or tear in the blood vessel wall. This tearing would initiate platelets to adhere to the site, releasing chemicals. These chemicals are essentially going to cause for more chemicals to be attracted, more platelets to be attracted to it. And that actually is a positive feedback. The initial stimulus here causing an amplified event to occur. And again, we're going to skip past this just because those are the same visuals there, right? Now, what is it whenever the body can't maintain homeostasis? Well, whenever there's a disturbance in homeostasis, this is actually the definition of disease, when the body is unable to maintain homeostasis for a particular variable, or it could be multiple variables. Now, this contributes to the changes associated with aging. Basically, unfortunately, as we age, the body becomes less able to maintain homeostasis for all these different body variables. It's also why you see a lot of geriatric individuals that tend to have multiple health problems. It's just the body systems aren't as efficient as we age. If negative feedback mechanisms become overwhelmed, then destructive positive feedback mechanisms may take over. One example of this would be when essentially the heart can't pump blood throughout the body adequately as it needs to. So this may cause the heart to actually become overworked. It's trying to work harder to pump that blood throughout the body, but this actually leads to heart failure. So again, it just becomes more of a destructive positive feedback mechanism. All right, that's the end of our first part of chapter 1. Join me next time for part B.